Backes and Bruce Rosen, and all kinds of people sitting behind, wonderful musicians.
Welcome to the retrospective for Randy Miller. He has been described as a New Hampshire treasure. He's a fiddler, he's an artist, he's a historian. That's very important, and a preservationist and a teacher. And you'll probably hear about all those things from a couple of speakers. You might, if you're really nice and we have time, you might even hear about another fiddle player we visited who could play mysterious notes, and you didn't know where they were coming from. Or a coffin factory, a dance in a coffin factory. Was any of you here at that dance? Nobody? Alan McIntyre was there at that dance. So we'll see. What else? There was something else, mystery.
It was amazing.
Yes, it was. Thank you. So, first I want to introduce a fellow musician who knew Randy before he even moved to New Hampshire and was playing a slightly different sort of music. And he wants to talk about that history. It was around Cambridge, Mass, right? Yeah. So this is Ken Siegel. He's played a lot for dances up in Maine. He played with us a lot at Nelson.
Got a few notes here. First I would say, a lot of you don't know this about Randy, but he gets up every morning at 4:30 a.m., goes over to his bedroom window, opens it up, and climbs in. Now, seriously, over half a century ago, I met this guy at a music festival in New York, Fox Hollow Festival. And he went into Boston to look for a job and a possible place to live. And there was one time I recall we went down and I had an old tape recorder. An old real tape recorder. I was making field recordings of all these old fiddle players. And we met up with this old fiddle player by the name of Franklin George. And I think he kind of turned us on to Irish music because we were recording him off on the side somewhere in a field, and he said, I'm going to play some old, this is an old Irish tune. Played a couple old tunes like that, and mentioned some names like Michael Coleman and stuff like that. It really intrigued us. And on the ride home, we were listening back on the tape of him playing. He was playing one tune. We couldn't figure out that he said the name. We asked him afterward, what's the name of the tune? And he had this heavy southern drawl going, Folder. And he kept rewinding the tape. In the car, he kept rewinding that part of the tape, trying to figure out what the hell the name of the tune was. I think Randy finally figured it out. He asked around Boston and finally, learned the tune. He said, that's Barrel of Arrow. But I think Jack and Randy kind of hit it off. They were very good athletes. Randy being a star basketball player at Oberlin College, by the way. And Jack being a star baseball player for Harvard. And that's true. It's true. He was scouted out by Cleveland. All right. Well, anyway, they hit it off because they like the athletics and stuff. they started pursuing the Irish music stuff. And we heard, we still like the old-timey stuff, we heard this old-timey fiddle player who would play up in New Hampshire about every month for these things called contradances. And this old-timey fiddler was Alan Block. And we thought we'd go up and listen to Alan, and I brought up my tape recorder, it's still on the side. And there was this guy by the name of Billy Walken who called, and he called dances, you know, in Francistown. And we'd go up on the Saturdays, and, you know, we would get home back to Cambridge at 2 or 3 in the morning, because inevitably afterwards. And all kinds of great old musicians were there, and Randy was in demand because he, exceptional guitar player, exceptional piano player. I didn't want to do that, he wanted to play the fiddle. He's getting tired of backing everybody up. He wanted to play the fiddle. And he became one heck of a fiddle player too. And but after a while we started pursuing the Irish music, and we really loved the Irish music, and after a while, and so thanks for being here, Randy. I want to thank you for the music.
I'm delighted to honor Natalie for his lifetime contributions to the world of traditional music and dance. As a friend, wife of 20 years, and co-parent, I've benefited from his music he created. The shared love of music and dance brought us together and is a lasting bond. One little story that relates to Ralph Page weekend is before we had kids, I can remember driving Ralph Page into Boston so he could call the bands. And it was quite a sensory experience to drive into the bands, fill the car with cigar smoke. But Randy and I met at a dance, and we also sort of both grew up with the love of the music and dance community. our life together was sustained by his art. When our kids were young, they danced to the tunes he played on the piano, and the monthly dances in the church across the street were a big part of our social life. Sometimes Randy seemed to pluck a tune out of the air. I can remember a particularly haunting tune he was playing, and when I asked him what the name of the tune was, he just kind of woke up and, he was just playing it. And I hope he wrote it down. He has written down a lot of tunes, and as some of you know, he has a great collection of tunes that he's written. Music from Mill Hollow, which I highly recommend. So the community in East Alstead, where we made our home, included some elders with dance experience and young people enthusiastic about the revival of the music and dance. The potlucks and dances brought together our local community and a larger world of musicians and scholars and dancers. So besides organizing the dance, Randy helped set up concerts, and often we hosted musicians in our living room and, for supper and good sessions. So the monthly dances really kept the home fires burning, and we thoroughly also enjoyed family adventures out to festivals and Napa and Old Songs and other festivals around. So, I was just talking about how our community was brought together, and the dance community, and then our family, and some of our family is here. But Lynette, our eldest, sends this message from Chicago, where she's made her home. Randy's love language has always been music, acts of service, essay editing, and history lessons shared with humor and heart. I'm so proud of you, Dad. Thank you for the soundtrack for my feelings and my life. Love, Lynn. So, Randy is continuing to share his music with the local community in sessions and dances. May the dance go on. And here's my son, Will.
How's that? Good afternoon, everybody. I'd like to share with you two stories today. The first, written by the composer himself, appears in the tune book Music from Mill Hollow. The second is a reflection on my childhood that I wrote for this occasion. In the first story, I am the young son accompanying an adventure with my dad. And he writes, "Over in Sharon, 30 miles from my home in New Hampshire, lived John Taggart, the fiddler. He was born in 1854, growing up to the sounds of his father and grandfather's Scotch-Irish fiddling. He moved away to Massachusetts as a young man and never returned. His folks died and the abandoned house rotted away. In the late 1980s, I took my young son with me to try to find the Taggart ruins in Sharon. I had studied town histories and pored through his autobiography for clues to the house site. We parked along Route 123 and struck off across the stone wall into the woods, into the pucker brush. My son was riding piggyback. The brush was too thick for him to walk. We trudged a quarter of a mile in, and it took us an hour. We reached the end of a stone wall, and I saw some lilac trees, a clue. We searched all around the lilacs for another half hour, fighting off mosquitoes, till we found it, a hole in the ground filled with leaves and ferns, but lined with half-hidden stone walls. My son and I danced the jig in Taggart's cellar hole." I still remember that, actually. My dad's interest in history, local and beyond, permeates much of his creative work. Growing up in our childhood home on North Road in East Alstead, I thought it was perfectly normal to look closely at the walls and see horse hairs poking out of the ancient plaster, or to have my view of the 150-year-old sugar maples in the yard distorted by bubbles in each pane of the antique window glass. In the 1980s, the same decade when Dad was bushwhacking around looking for cellar holes, we kids, my sister Lynette, my brother Owen, and I, were treated to the soothing sounds of his fiddle and piano music many evenings as we were drifting off to sleep, much like the young Taggart, I imagine. His interest in history and his artistic creativity was woven into the fabric of our childhoods in other interesting ways. When I was old enough to sit at his booth at the Sunapee Craft Fair, I remember selling dozens of copies of a game he produced by hand called Celtic Realm. He had cut up a print of one of his wood engravings that depicted symbols from a 9th century illuminated manuscript, the Book of Kells, and made it into the base of an adapted version of one of the oldest known board games from ancient Mesopotamia. Again, I thought nothing of how so many hours of my childhood were spent playing an ancient board game remixed by my dad. As I got a little older, though, it started to dawn on me how much of a privilege it was to have him as my dad. Sure, it was frustrating to us kids that we were so often discouraged from bothering him in his back workroom in the house, but maybe there was something special happening in our midst. One such epiphany was an unforgettable Christmas morning when we kids went to look under the tree. Leading up to that Christmas, we had gotten 2 repeated PSAs from Mom and Dad. The first was the familiar admonishment, don't go in Dad's workroom without asking. And the second, even more dispiriting, that this was going to be a somewhat modest year for gifts. Reaganomics have not been kind to artists like our dad. More of a siphon than a trickling down. Aside from stockings, in fact, that morning there appeared to me maybe just 1 or 2 gifts for each family member. We opened them all until there was just 1 gift left, labeled with all 3 kids' names from Dad. 2 heavy tissue paper wrapped rectangles. Inside the first, a little wooden box chock full of tiny treasures, carefully fitted in colorful miniature baskets and bins. Tiny bundles of silk flowers, birchwood pegs hand carved into inch-long beaver sticks, shiny red wooden apples, a little box containing tiny cut panes of window glass with smooth sanded edges and a single bubble in each. The second rectangle was a large laminated wooden custom board game he had built in his back room, labeled East Alstead Treasure Hunt. In the coming months and years, we spent countless hours rolling the dice to move our little pawns around that board that was our neighborhood. Up North Road to gather beaver sticks and that board gravestone rowings for 4 points each. Across Old Settlers Road to collect apples from the Elder's Orchard for 3 points each. And back to the house via Forest Road, where those silk wildflowers, worth an incredible 5 points each, were one of the last items to collect. Our little colored baskets brimmed with tantalizing treasures to tally, and my little mind hummed with pride at our dad's genius and loving generosity. Today, as we honor the gift of his musical contributions to the world, I thank you all for taking the time to reflect on this personal story of a dad's gifts to his young children, and encourage you to reflect on a time when Randy's mastery of traditional music may have enriched your own life. Thank you.
Oh, yes, slight change in schedule. Jane Worcester, who I happen to know is Jane McBride. Sorry.
I'm sorry, Sarah will be right up. Don't go away. So just my most obvious impressions, but worked with him, an accomplished, versatile musician on fiddle, accordion, piano. He knows so many tunes in different genres, especially New Irish, Scottish tunes, etc. He has published, as you know, a bunch of terrific books that contain at least a portion of some of the tunes he knows or has composed. The wonderful thing about Randy is that he is great fun to play music with. He manages to lead Irish sessions with a fount of tunes at his disposal and with unfailing encouragement and respect for other musicians. His very strong rhythmic style and beautiful tone draws you right in. You may not know this, but I have home movies of him playing at our wedding in Newcastle, New Hampshire in 1981 with Peter over there, who's still married. They're 16mm movies that my father took, so unfortunately there's no sound. But I can report that they told me that they had a new waltz for us, and the name of the waltz was Amelia by Bob and Claude. The first time I ever heard the tune, and they played it very nicely. So I'm grateful to have had the privilege of playing music with you, Randy, and thanks for all the music and good times.
Hi, I'm Sarah Bowen, and I can't remember not knowing Randy. I mean, it just seems like even when, he's a little older than me, not that much, but he was always on the scene with Canterbury Orchestra, and then in the 70s, my dad, who was a publisher, hired Randy to illustrate a couple of books. Well, the first one was called More Than Land by Heman Chase, who was from East Alstead, Chase's Mill, right? And Randy, can you tell me or tell us how you got into wood engraving real fast? Because I'm fuzzy on that detail.
It was when I was living in Boston and got curious about the old illustrations that you would see in books. You know, who did those? And how were they done? So I read the entire section on wood engraving at the Boston Public Library. And there happened to be a wood sculptor living right next door. And he had these engraving tools, and those weren't the right tools for him because he was doing big sculptures, you know. So he heard that I was interested and he gifted me these tools, and I still have them today.
Wow.
So Randy, what was your first engraving? I remember.
My first engraving, I had a deck of cards and there was a Scottish bagpipe on it, so I did the, with a bag and all.
No, sir. There's two women over there wearing t-shirts with his engraving.
That's right. So Teresa and Sarah are wearing two of his early wood engravings. Well, it's the same one, A Time to Dance, that he did for Dick Neville's book, A Time to Dance, and that's become sort of iconic in the dance world. So, but in '75 he did this book with Heman Chase, and trying to make this quick, my mother's cousin in England was married to a man named Ian Bain, who was a piper, Northumbrian piper, also the head of the Tate Gallery publication department, and he would come over to America every May to go to the museums conference, and he would always come to us and play his pipes, and so, all of a sudden we all had all this Northumbrian music coming in, but then Ian and Randy discovered their mutual love of wood engraving because Ian was the foremost expert on a man named Thomas Bewick, who was probably the preeminent wood engraver in England in the late 18th, early 19th century. And Anyway, so they struck up a friendship. Randy and Kathy went over to England and then to Scotland, and Randy got a set of pipes, and you know, it was just a really wonderful, wonderful, friendship there. And Ian introduced tunes to the canon, and we played Farewell to the Creeks and things like that. And I got to take Randy's wood engravings, and because I took over my dad's publishing company, and put them back into another book by Judd Hale. So we're keeping the wood engraving going, but I feel like I've known Randy in two worlds, and the world of wood engraving is a small one. And Randy, Herbert Waters, Nora Unwin are the preeminent wood engravers in New Hampshire. So I think, look for his stuff, because it's just beautiful.
That later learned to play a little fiddle, but I'm first and foremost a dancer. And I've known Randy since I was a teenager, trying to figure out how to get a ride to a dance because my parents wouldn't let me hitchhike with my brother together. And Randy was a little older. He had not much, not at all today, but you had some sort of transportation, and you actually got paid to go to dances and plays. Little did I know that this fabulous music I was hearing wasn't the normal. Like your son said, you think that's what it is. And I have a digitized recording of a Duke Miller dance, which Duke says at some point, if you're wondering why the Miller brothers aren't here, they're out on the West Coast playing some festival out there. And the other thing I want to say about Randy is he's also an outstanding dancer, and there are a lot of musicians that can't dance for shit. I remember when I was in college, one of the early Thanksgiving Eve dances. It was in Walpole, and you were probably calling it Glorious Hall. Brattleboro Brass was playing. There were more men there I wanted to dance with than there were dances. But Randy was one of them, and I just enjoyed dancing with you so much. And between the music and the dancing and the woodcuts of New England rural scenes, I feel like Randy's one of the keepers in our tradition, and we are so lucky.
So Randy and myself and Peter Rensky and Lynn Clemens all say the same birthday, February 7th. It's coming up. Yeah. One time the dancers, this must have been back about 34 years ago, some of the dancers that were coming around the dancers challenged the Canterbury Country Dance Orchestra to a baseball game. And so Jack Harris got up, he was the first one up and hit a home run. And then Randy got up and hit a home run. And I got up and struck out. And, well, anyway, we creamed it. We did it. Didn't we? Huh?
Zero memory of that.
Is that right? That was a Putney. Yeah,
Sorry.
that's it.
This is my good friend, drove over from the Ithaca, New York area today in the snowstorm. Tom Hodgson was a founding member of my band Celtic Clabber back in, I don't know, 15 years ago.
I want to represent those who have had the good fortune of being on the road with us fellow. And I noticed there's some of them from the 85 trip to Europe with the Green Mountain Volunteers. Steve and Ann, and as I said, he was a wonderful diplomat. Wherever he went, he represented New Hampshire's traditional music and his own music very well throughout all the cities across the country that we went to. And it was also true throughout Europe, where we went with the Green Mountain Volunteers. However, the diplomacy stopped at the border. We were stopped on the border of Austria, and at that time it was called Czechoslovakia, but I think it was the Czech Republic. And there was a very efficient border guard with an AK-47 that stopped our bus. And rather than being intimidated, Randy and I went out and threw a baseball to one another. And one of the days, my throw, he is a rifle arm, dead accurate. I was a little more on the wayward side. So I threw one that went past this barbed wire fence. and the guard was standing there daring us to cross that fence. He had no qualms at all to walk over and pick up the ball. I thought he was going to toss it to the guard, but the second border crossing story happened in Victoria, BC. We were coming up from having played the dance in Olympia, Washington, and we were going to play a dance in Victoria. And we had a car full of product, carefully buried in the back of the car. And we did not, at that time, we didn't have the prescience to know that we needed a work permit to go across the border. And the guard was a very wonderful English gentleman. They're very polite in BC, particularly in Victoria. And as he was going through the layers, we were becoming more and more anxious as it was getting down to the lowest level, which was where all the product was, which was mostly his tune books. And it was obviously we were just not friends visiting, but we were a touring band. And as he got to the penultimate lever, he said, "Oh, pudding time." And he walked away. So we were good. But then as we were coming into town, getting to the dance, we stopped at a light, and he was in the adjacent car to us. And one of our bandmates handed him, wanted to give him a CD. Anyway, I will say seriously, this man is beloved throughout the country. And as I said, I've benefited by being, you know, in his shadow or reflected light, whatever you want to call it. But and I'm very honored to be here today to join you all in celebrating his wonderful contributions to traditional music and dance. Thank you.
The only last thing I can say really is, you heard everybody, and I hope you can rest assured that your commitment to contradance, the contradance music, and the musicians, past and present, is not unnoticed and not unappreciated.
The tune by Randy is The Queen of Sheba Departs. No, The Queen of Sheba Arrives and then departs. No, just arrives.